Yinti goes hunting. Once there lived in the desert a small boy named Yinti. He had two mothers, his real mother and a younger woman she called sister. These two women shared one husband, Yinti's father. Yinti called both his mothers Nagamaji, and I'm sorry if I got that wrong. And so begins Yinti, Desert Child by Jimmy Pike and Pat Lowe. This is the story of Jimmy Pike, or Yinti, his early childhood living in the desert before he had first contact with white settlers. Today I'm going to be talking about the three books in this series: Yinti, Desert Child, Yinti's Desert Dogs, and Yinti, Desert Cowboy. Now these books were written in the early 1990s and have been republished by Magabala Books. These are quite important books because they talk about what life was like for Jimmy, or Yinti, in Australia before he had contact with white settlers. So this one here actually talks about Yinti's life. Oh, sorry, this one, Yinti's life in the Great Sandy Desert of Western Australia before he, as a teen, moved to the cattle stations to work as a cattleman. So it talks about his father, his mother, and his other mother, and how they hunted, how they survived, how they moved around the desert, how they relied on the dingo, how the dingo was used, those sorts of things. It's a really, really interesting look into what life was like for Yinti at that time. At the end of the book, he actually chooses to move on, and he goes to one of the cattle stations with a cousin. And then that takes us to this book here, which is Yinti's Desert Dog. And this is actually written from the perspective of Spinifex, and Spinifex is Yinti's dog, and it talks about her coming to live with Yinti's family, and then when they go to the cattle station, what the cattle station's like, and how then they move back into the desert. And then the final book is this one here, Yinti, Desert Cowboy. Now, Yinti, Desert Cowboy is all about his life once he's left the desert for good, and what it's like to live on the station, and what it's like to be moving around. Now, the first one has a really, it talks about law, and the law of what it's of living on the land, and the things that are expected of you, and what happens if you break those laws. I really loved it. I really loved it, and sometimes I cringed because I'm coming from a white person's perspective. So they were really good for me to get an understanding. Like, you know, that first paragraph that I read to you about Yinti's father having two wives. I mean, as a white person from the perspective of monogamy, I found that a very hard thing to read. So there's a lot of stuff in here to talk about with children, and why things were the way they were. I highly recommend them if you can get them. You can get them through Magabala Books. You can get them through local booksellers. I'd suggest going through Magabala Books because then you know that the profit goes directly to them, or to the authors, or whoever the royalties are meant to go to. Go have a look. They're worth reading. Thanks.